if I can invite you to just a very short meditation.
Sure, why not?
It feels kind of good, doesn't it?
No, not really. I was...
You just... Velkommen til podcasten Noen har snakket sammen. Jeg heter Trygve Svensson, er daglig leder i Tanks Min Agenda, og nå skal jeg straks skru over på engelsk, fordi vi har en engelsktalende gjest med oss her i dag. Welcome to our podcast, Rutger Bregman.
Thanks for having me.
Great having you.
I thought we were going to do this in Norwegian, but luckily my Norwegian is a little bit rusty, so...
But I think there might... I mean, it's a very ssimilar language.
Is it?
Yeah. It is.
It's all abracadabra for me, what you were saying.
Is it? You know, my dialect, you know, we've only been speaking English, but I'm from Bergen, the second largest city. Yeah. And that's quite influenced by Dutch, actually.
Ah, well, look, we Dutch, we watch a lot of Danish, Swedish, and I think also Norwegian series, like all the crime series where everyone ends up dead, like murdered in a slaughtered, horrific way. It's like by now everyone must be murdered, right? In Scandinavia.
I'm amazed there's still people here, to be honest.
Yeah. My Swedish editor said this to me once, like, in Sweden, everyone is killed twice.
So how do you like, you've been in Norway pretty intense couple days, you know?
Yeah.
How is it?
It's awesome. Yeah, no, it's really cool. It was really cool last night. Obviously, we had a great dinner with a bunch of pretty morally ambitious people discussing the state of the world. That is increasingly depressing. Yeah. So the good people need to come together and step up their game, basically.
Let's talk about that. Yeah. You know, just to be open, you're one of my intellectual heroes. You've written some very important books. I would like to start off with just placing ourselves in history, where we are right now, and sort of using your books maybe as a starting point. We're in the fall of 2025. I brought all your 3 books. You have Utopia for Realists, which came out in 2014, if I remember.
Yeah, in the Netherlands in 2014. It was published a little bit later, 3 years later in other countries. I wrote it in 2013, actually. Yeah. And Humankind was, just before the pandemic in Dutch in 2019.
And then
2020 in English, yeah.
And now you have your new book, Moral Ambition, that's just being translated to Norwegian and many other languages. Yeah. So can you just take us through your own sort of intellectual developments going through those 3 books? Because for me, they're 3 pretty different types of work.
Sure, yeah. So 2013, when I was writing my first book, Utopia for Realists, I was bored. I was just bored with politics. I looked at the last 2 centuries and thought, okay, we've achieved amazing things. We're richer, we're healthier, we're wealthier than we've ever been before. We've made massive progress. We've, had these milestones of civilization, abolishing slavery, getting women the right to vote, equal rights, civil rights movement, taking down apartheid. But what's next, right? The Berlin Wall has fallen. We have arrived at the end of history, they tell us, and I'm just bored. So Utopia for Realists was an attempt to reopen the windows of thought, to come up with new crazy ideas, just like social democracy was once an utterly bizarre, crazy idea. To see like, okay, what's the next big thing we can fight for? And so one of the ideas was, hey, maybe we can totally abolish poverty by just giving people money, a universal basic income. Maybe we can move towards a much shorter working week, right? To use the benefits of automation, the rise of the robots to really fulfill that promise of capitalism that was once given to us. Like, hey, when the robots will do the work, we can find out what life is really about, what true leisure is.
Yeah, Keynes said, right?
Yeah. So that was that book.
I just have to say, because 2013 I was a politician. We were campaigning. The Social Democrats, we've been in government for 8 years, and it was that was a very strange campaign, because it was like nothing really mattered. It was really boring, and when you went around campaigning, it was like already it was decided that we're going to lose the election after 8 years in power. And then, of course, you had a very right-wing government, and that changed a lot.
Yeah.
So I sort of get that with this atmosphere.
I lived for a year in the United States just now in New York, and coming to Norway, coming to Oslo, kind of gives you that feeling like, what's left here? Like what's politics even about here?
Left.
Like, I get it that you say that, but compared to like the daily tragedies and inequalities and horrors that you see on the streets of Brooklyn and in Manhattan, you know, the enormous homeless population, so many people who are just utterly destroyed, addicted, people in psychosis in the subway all the time. I mean, this is like paradise compared to that. But again, that boringness cannot guide us, right? You always got to be looking out for the next thing. And then at the same time, I mean, I wrote that in 2013, a long time ago, more than a decade ago. Yeah. And now it seems I kind of got what I wished for. Like things are less boring, but not in the way I would have hoped.
It's like a Chinese proverb, right? That I hope you should not live in interesting times.
I guess so. Yeah. And it's very interesting times now, in the sense that we have become the resistance, right? Countries like Norway, with a proud social democratic tradition, with very strong unions, with strong social democratic parties, that's the exception right now. And I guess that's the main thing I wanted to talk about with you guys, and what we talked about yesterday is like, what does that mean? Like also geopolitically, ideologically, morally, what does it mean not to be the mainstream anymore? Like, okay, you can have this nice gated community where you have a very fancy train from the airport to here, where I was pretty impressed. I was like, is this first class or something? I was looking like, where do I sit? But apparently it was all, I could sit everywhere. Yeah. But yeah, it's nice to have that for yourself. But if the world is going to hell, then at some point you will notice it in your gated community.
We have to talk about that, and we have to talk about our Sovereign Wealth Fund as well. But let's get through the and then after you finished
Utopia,
then you can come with this big one, Humankind, which I guess really rocketed your career in some way, or at least expanded how people viewed you as an author. So what was the deal with that one?
Yeah, I spent a long time writing that book. I think almost 5 years. As I had finished Utopia for Realists, I realized that many of the ideas I was most excited by were built on a completely different conception of human nature, of who we are as a species. So take something simple like universal basic income, giving people money, venture capital for the people. That assumes that people can be trusted. And I know that is a pretty common idea in Norway. You have the World Values Survey. Since the 1950s, researchers have been asking people around the world, like, on average, do you think most people can be trusted, yes or no? And Norway often scores highest there. Very high trust society. But in most countries, that's not the case. And there's a huge amount of distrust, and it's actually been growing. So the US is a good example. It used to be a high trust society. Now it's a low trust society. And then suddenly all kinds of political possibilities aren't there anymore. Like, you can't do participative democracy, for example, reimagining what it means to do democracy, if you don't believe in people. So I wanted to make a big intellectual case for people, for humanity itself.
Basic, decent.
Yeah, I just wanted to argue that we're not as bad as we often think we are. The reason I also wanted to do it is because, I mean, I'm a generalist, right? Academics these days are very, very specialized, which is incredibly powerful, right? In all my works, I rely on the best specialists in the world, right? What could be a sentence in my book could be like a 4-year PhD for someone else, right? And I wouldn't be able to write my books with those specialists. But I think we have too few generalists. And academia these days, I mean, it doesn't really have the jobs for those generalists. That's why I left academia. I wanted to ask the big questions about human nature and history. And what I started to see was that there was a convergence happening. So both in anthropology and sociology and psychology, even in economics, there was a move towards a more hopeful view of human nature. But when I spoke to a lot of these experts, they often didn't realize what was going on in the field next to theirs. So I remember vividly that I was talking to a psychologist, her name is Marie Lindegaard, who had done extraordinary research on the so-called bystander effect, which is what people do when they see something terrible happening in the streets, right? For a long time, people believed, oh, they'll do nothing, right? And the more people are there to witness this thing, someone's drowning or someone's being attacked, then the more likely it is they'll be apathetic. Very depressing message. She had done rigorous empirical research that showed that the opposite is true.
People help.
Yeah, people help. That's in general what they do. So we've got a lot of CCTV footage, obviously, from a lot of cities now because cameras are everywhere. So she built this huge database with her colleagues from, from London, from Cape Town, from Copenhagen. And they just looked how real people in the real world behave. And it was quite hopeful. So she was explaining that whole research to me. And I was saying, like, I recently spoke to Frans de Waal, the great Dutch primatologist. And did you know that this is happening, in biology as well? A move towards a more hopeful view of who we are. And she said, I had no idea it was happening there, right? And that's an effect of that specialization. So in this book, I wanted to take the bird's eye view and to really describe the big picture, like, hey, something really amazing is happening here in science. And then in the second half of the book, also describe the political possibilities that would be unlocked.
And I remember reading that and thinking it's so much a question of perception. Like, for instance, my grandmother, who was like the best human being I ever encountered, was always watching the news on TV, right? And she was always, very concerned about how the world was turning. But she was a fantastic human being. She treated everybody around her in her close circle as a fantastic human being. But she was still, spending every evening watching the news and worrying, does the world become to?
Yeah, that's really the challenge. So this is what psychologists sometimes call mean world syndrome. People who consume a lot of the news are often more depressed, more cynical, also more distrustful of others. So yeah, that's the point that I keep making in probably all my books, is like the news is really not good for you. That doesn't mean that I want you to only think about the good things in life. No, what I want you to do is to zoom out, to look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is in some ways hopeful, right? Very often, this is the very first sentence of my first book, Utopia for Realists. In the past, everything was worse. People see, the violence, the oppression, the racism today. Well, hold my beer, it was so much worse.
Yeah.
It's sometimes unimaginable to us. I was recently reading a newspaper from the 1930s in the US about families that were just picnicking while Black people were being lynched. And it was like entertainment for the masses, right?
Yeah.
And
we talk about polarization.
Yeah.
Right. And if you look at, how political debates were going on before, the things people were called, it was like,
it's like fighting.
Like fighting, or somebody would be called Satan or something without problem. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So in a way, we've become, how do you say that, softies, and we're not used to anything anymore.
That's a good thing,
which is sometimes a good thing. But it's my point is it's important to have that broad perspective. But an honest broad perspective today. Is also quite terrifying. I'll be honest.
Yeah, that's when we're moving on, because this is a hopeful book, and I've heard you talked about it before, that you were sort of like when you saw people posting pictures of this on a beach on Instagram, and like, oh, the world is okay, we're good. I felt a bit struck myself, because I was single at the time when I read it, and I put it on my Tinder profile, and it was like, I believe in humanity. So, and I'm not single anymore.
Yeah, it works.
It works. but then you were compelled to do something else. Suddenly, you turn all moral on us.
Yeah.
What happened?
It's interesting. I don't want to be too sexist, but it's interesting that Humankind, my previous book, was mostly popular with women. I once did a talk during the pandemic, actually, when we couldn't go out. And it was a pretty massive event. 25,000 people bought a ticket for the talk about Humankind. And I think it was 80% women. But with Moral Ambition, it's much more appealing for men, actually. So I don't know, anyone can be morally ambitious, don't get me wrong. And human nature, the message is for, but I found that interesting in the demographics of my readers, that it seems to me that this book is is sometimes more appealing for men. And I'm kind of glad as well, because there's such a gap in the culture to be filled there, right? We all know about toxic masculinity. But what's the opposite of that, right? What's the message to our young boys? Like, okay, we don't want you to be toxic, but like, what's the opposite? There was recently a poll in the US where 50% of Democrats said that masculinity is bad anyway, right? Yeah. But that's not, you can't say that. No. I mean, I just became a father. Our son was born 8 months ago. And I was like, okay, now let's read all the awesome books about boys are smart, boys are cool. Just like the kind of books that I read for our daughter, you know, who's 4 years old now. And it was a gap, right? There's a gap in the culture there. Who are, like, what's like the good Andrew Tate out there? Like, who's telling, you know, about the hero's journey, about, I don't know, the Frodos, the Luke Skywalkers, the Aragorns, you know, the men who teach us that, and it's telling, by the way, that I have to revert to fantasy instead of talking about real people. But you get my point, right? Real masculinity, in my view, is about using your power, using what you have to do as much good. And the most manly men do the most good. And sure, sometimes we can be accused of heroes complexes or whatever, but I'd much rather have that than the nastiness of the Andrew Tates of this.
Yeah, so it seems always like almost known like the ambitious masculines on the world stage. At least that's the Putin and the Trumps and the Netanyahus, right?
Yeah.
And that's not well, it's it's certainly not a positive type of masculinity.
Yeah. There has to be a different kind of masculine leadership. There has to be, and I think there are many examples throughout history. I mean, the example that I talk about a lot in the book is a fairly unknown abolitionist, Thomas Clarkson, who was, according to historians, the most important abolitionist in the history of the whole movement. So I discovered that abolitionism was pretty much non-existent in the Netherlands, where I'm from, in France, in Spain, in Portugal. The whole movement against the slave trade and the slavery hardly existed. In the US, it was a total failure. In the end, it took a civil war. And before that, abolitionism was extremely toxic and extremely unpopular. But in the UK, it took off in a massive way. And it started with a small group of 12 individuals, 12 founders of the British Society for the Abolition of the Slave Trade. 10 out of 12 were entrepreneurs, people who knew what it meant to have skin in the game, who knew how to translate ideas into action. One was a theologian, a sort of self-taught theologian and civil servant, and one was a writer. And the last one was Thomas Clarkson. And he's like, his whole life story is kind of a Luke Skywalker kind of story, like kind of like a Frodo kind of story, who, you know, when he's 25 years old, he hears the calling, right? It's just by accident that he participated in this essay contest where he had to answer this question, like, is it okay to own and sell other human beings? He'd never really thought about the question. He participates because he wants to become a famous writer.
Yeah, he's a bit vain.
Yeah, he's a bit vain, yeah. And he says that clearly in his memoirs, that it was like literally honor and glory, that was what was interesting to him. And he wins first prize. And then he goes to Cambridge, to the Senate House, reads out the essay, you know, very nice ceremony for him. He goes back to London where he lives. And then there's this very famous moment when he's near the city or the village of Wade's Mill. And he keeps thinking about, you know, what he has just written. And he's like, but if this is true, shouldn't someone do something about it? And I think it's this incredible moment where a young man can suddenly see himself as the world historical hero who takes on slavery and the slave trade. And if you read his memoirs, yes, part of you thinks, okay, this is a bit of a vain man, right? But the point is he did it. I think virtue signaling is allowed if you're actually virtuous.
You know, I think it's interesting that you talk a bit about masculinity here. It's a question we've been grappling quite a bit with in our think tank, actually, because, well, I remember the first time that I looked at the voting numbers in 2017, and we knew this already. It's like a deep trend, and it's going all through the West that women are usually voting more left-leaning, and guys are voting a lot, you know, for the right. And this has been like this deep trend, and you can get pretty worried about it in many ways. You know, it's of course, if you're on the left, it's a political issue, but also, you know, how will this affect the society after a while? You know, if all the women have one political outlook and all the guys have another, how will they, you know, when they form families and friendship and so forth? How is this going to be?
And you lose elections.
You lose election. That's you know. So at least I totally agree with you that if you want to talk about toxic masculinity, you have to talk about positive masculinity as well. And by the way, you should talk about toxic femininity in the same way, and toxic.
Look, becoming a parent and then becoming a bit older. I mean, that's been a reality check for me as well. Like my wife and I, we were like the classic progressives in a way. We still are, right? Saying like, okay, we want to have kids and we're going to do it 50-50. And the fact that you're a mother and that I'm a father, that's like, I don't know, that's a word, that's a technicality. That's just, there are like some technicalities like, because of biology, you have to actually deliver the baby. But that, you know, that's kind of irrelevant. And then you have kids and you're like, no, that's not irrelevant. That's like, there are like very deep biological realities. And motherhood is beautiful. Fatherhood is beautiful, but they're not the same. They're different, right? The way, you know, I throw around our kids, you know, how I love to, you know, swing them around the house. It's just not, my wife doesn't do that. And Frans de Waal, the primatologist I just mentioned, you know, he would be like, yeah, obviously, like you're primates. That's a very... And I don't want to generalize. Obviously, there are differences. It's not like binary, right? There are many ways to be a woman. There are many ways to be a man. But yeah, there are also certain tendencies. And I think, in a way, the left kind of lost it until a couple of years ago. In the US, but that had like global repercussions. Like if you, that people went really far in denying some biological realities.
Yeah, I know. Fortunately, I think it's not the case here. But we've been looking at it like sort of like, and of course some of the debates.
That's true, yeah. So, but that's the same in the. I mean, all these crazy culture wars in the US. You know, it always gets dragged to the most extreme situations where you're like obviously gender dysphoria exists. Obviously, gender is a spectrum, right? And we want to have everyone lead a dignified life, and surely we can come to pragmatic solutions, right? I don't honestly care all that much where I take a leak.
Let's not make the huge deal of it.
No,
because we have bigger fishes to fry, right?
Exactly. That's the main point. Yeah.
Okay. So so you start off this book, your latest book, with talking about the French monk Mathieu Richard, if I don't know if I pronounce it right, who he was like this young guy. He had a very promising career. Then suddenly he gets filled with, you know, he was writing his PhD and everything. And then, okay, this doesn't make sense to me. He leaves Paris. He goes to Tibet. He meditates for
60,000 hours.
60,000 hours. Well, can we just try something, actually? I don't know if you meditate yourself, but...
Rarely.
Well, let's if I can invite you to just a very short meditation.
Sure, why not?
It feels kind of good, doesn't it?
No, not really. I was...
You just...
I was in the midst of a podcast, man.
Yeah. Because what I was thinking is... I was reading that. And I was thinking, oh, this is interesting. Yeah, I should, you know, start meditating more again. Because I do that sometimes. And then you're like... You have this turnaround and it's like... this is the most selfish guy I ever heard of.
Yeah. 60,000 hours in his own head and not doing anything for the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you just elaborate on that?
Sure. Look, there are a lot of self-help books out there that teach you how to be more productive, mindful, happy. I don't know. But yeah, life is about so much more, isn't it? For me, living a rich, well-rounded life is also very much about what you contribute, what you build, what you do. And look, don't get me wrong. I see the enormous value of meditation. I should probably do it more. It's it's a super useful tool to keep you grounded. But I guess there was something that really nagged me in that particular story, because this man was celebrated as the most compassionate, most empathetic man they had ever found. They put him in a brain scanner, and apparently like the regions in his brain that are all about compassion were super big. Yeah. And I was like, but like, I don't care about his brain. I care about what he actually does, right? Yeah. Compassion is not something you think. Compassion is something you do.
It's a verb.
Yeah. And look, I write about this in the epilogue of the book. Mathieu Ricard realized this himself when he was in his 50s, and then he became a really morally ambitious individual who's doing very admirable work. But there's kind of a Mac mindfulness in our culture today. Like so many self-help books that are all about, you need to care for yourself, self-compassion, right? You deserve this. You really deserve it. The subtle art of not giving a fuck. Yeah. You need the courage to be disliked. And I was like, but initially I had this idea, like, it's called Moral Ambition, obviously, but another contender for the job title was The Radical Art of Giving a Fuck. You know?
Yeah. I guess why I want to challenge it is because I agree with this self-obsessed, we can be so obsessed with ourselves that we don't do anything. And that I think is really bad for us. So I totally agree. But you also have, I've seen so many political active people and activists or people who just want to change society in a way who, and now in this day and age with, these things creating massive brain rot, that people they don't do like your abolitionist hero who gets a burnout after 7 years. They have like a burnout after 7 weeks or 7 months. Yeah. So I guess I will, give a strike, make an argument for balance, that people should change the world and meditate.
Absolutely. I totally get that. The point I was trying to make there mostly is like, what is life even about? Like, what is the goal of life? And I think the assumption of many of those books, and also in a story like that about the happiest monk in the world, is that is the main goal in life. And I just profoundly disagree. There's this quote at the beginning of the book. I'd love to read it to you. I think it's a pretty good summary of what I'm trying to do in the book. It's from Leo Rosten, a writer, who said, "I cannot believe that the purpose of life is to be happy. I think the purpose of life is to be useful, to be responsible, to be honorable, to be compassionate. It is, above all, to matter, to count, to stand for something, to have it make some difference that you lived at all." That resonates with me immensely, honestly. I'm the son of a preacher turned atheist when I was 17, 18 years old, who has always been grappling with the big questions of life. Like, why are we here? What does it even mean? And I think the best thing we can do, on this short time on Earth, is to build monuments in time, right? To be part of something that's much bigger than us. These great morally ambitious movements. And again, I say this in the epilogue. I'm not saying that should suck up everything. As I said, I'm a dad as well. And on Saturday when I'm playing with my kids, I'm not thinking about the fight against malaria or the tobacco industry or whatever. I just want to be a really good father. But yeah, that richness in life is something I'm very much looking for and advocating in this book.
I guess what makes this book a bit different than the other books is also that it's sort of like you are taking a step away from being, very successful writer, and more you want to build something basically, and you want to inspire people to build something. Yeah. So that's like the project here.
Yeah. And we are building something. Yeah. So the book is just a starting shot of a movement that we're building and an organization that I co-founded called the School for Moral Ambition. We're helping as many people as possible to quit their bullshit jobs and take on some of the most pressing issues we face as a species. The evidence that I quote in the book as well is now we have 25% of people who think that their own job is socially meaningless. That's an enormous waste of talent. And it's mostly people who have nice resumes, beautiful LinkedIn profiles, have gone to nice universities. And we think we cannot afford this waste anymore.
It's like I'm picturing this guy or a woman, and who is like sitting in a high rise, having a McKinsey offices or something.
That's it.
And listening to a mindfulness app, 10 minutes, just mindfulness, and then going back to
the PowerPoint.
Back to the PowerPoint, and you say, stop that, get out there, and
it's really important that we don't try to use moralistic language here. So I'm not saying like, oh, these greedy bankers, you're so bad, right? You should stop being such a bad, greedy banker. I don't think that works. We use the language of enthusiasm and excitement. I was just joking about that recently with a friend. Imagine a Netflix documentary that follows 12 individuals who just had the letter from McKinsey. They've gotten a job, right? They can start at McKinsey, and we follow them. The camera follows them from day one as they build their first PowerPoint deck. And then they do another one. And then they're in a really long meeting with a partner they really dislike. It would be incredible television, right? It would be the best way to treat your insomnia ever. It would be better than the best mindfulness app. Like, it would be it's would be the most boring thing ever, right?
Yeah.
Now imagine a documentary about 12 incredibly talented, dedicated people taking on some of the greatest challenges we face as a species, right? Lead poisoning, extreme poverty, climate change, factory farming. And they travel around the world as they build the technologies, the coalitions, lobby parliaments, everything they can. That would be binge-worthy, right? Maybe not very good for your relaxing. You'd be like, whoa, this is awesome.
Yeah, you wouldn't be,
But that's kind of, that is the narrative approach that we use. This is our message to the best and brightest in the world today. Like, look, we need you. It's all hands on deck.
So how is it going for you? How is the school development? I know you have a lot of people signing up. I know you have people here in Norway signing up.
Yep.
Across the globe.
It's getting totally out of hand. It's really incredible. It's the coolest thing I've ever experienced in my whole career. So we now have more than 15,000 members in more than 100 countries. A lot of them, indeed, also in Norway and in Oslo. People are joining our fellowships. So that's a really exclusive program we're running, where we're really paying people to quit their job. The first cohort has just finished. The second cohort is now starting, and this is really corporate lawyers, entrepreneurs, former bankers, consultants, quitting their job, taking a pretty massive pay cut. Sometimes moving to Brussels even, where we give them a mission. So it's also, we don't use the follow your passion approach or something like that. The answer is not here. It's not in your navel or something like that. The answer is out there. So we work with prioritization researchers, and we ask them, okay, what are the biggest challenges we face right now? What are the most neglected global problems we got to work on? And fighting the tobacco industry, for example, is one of them.
That surprised me, to be honest.
Me as well, yeah. No, that was actually a huge surprise.
The top 5 for the, what would you say if there's somebody listening and they feel a itch of moral ambitiousness, what are the top 5 things you think people should plunge into?
So we have a pretty simple framework. It's called the SSS framework. We focus on the most sizable problems in the world. We focus on the most solvable problems in the world. And most importantly, we focus on the most sorely neglected problems in the world. That's where those 3 things come together. That's where the magic is. So take something like climate change, obviously very sizable, very solvable. Is it neglected? I would say less and less so. We really encourage people to work on the parts of climate change that are most neglected. So that's not EVs in Norway, right? That's already going through the roof. Clean electricity is doing quite well. Solar energy is the cheapest source of energy in history now. But food is still, highly neglected. 20% of emissions is food, mostly meat and dairy. And most people ignore it. We had a lovely dinner yesterday with lovely social democratic friends, and everyone's binging meat, right? Good people. But there is a total lack of awareness. We say we care about climate change, but it's 20% of the issue, right? So that's what we really encourage morally ambitious people to do. Think like an entrepreneur. Yeah. Do the kind of stuff that otherwise wouldn't happen. Don't just do whatever's fashionable or whatever does well in your Instagram timeline. but make future historians proud.
I noticed you talk about the protein transition, which I think is a pretty cool way to talk about it, because it's not like, oh, we have to suffer and quit eating meat. We just need more clever ways of, getting.
Yeah, no, you need to frame it in a really positive way. I think that's super important. We have 50 years of experience now in the animal rights movement and made very little progress. Just shaming people all the time. I mean, I like to do it with friends in particular, but that's because it's like a guilty pleasure. But I don't think it's a super
and
effective.
You still get invited to dinners.
Yeah. So well, I don't know obviously which dinners I've missed ever since I started doing it, but it's not a very effective political strategy, obviously. There's a chef of a restaurant in the Netherlands that has been voted the best plant-based restaurant in the world. It's really incredible. It's almost impossible to get a reservation there now. You go there and you taste things and you're like, I had no idea that this was possible with plants. And the way he described it to me is like, look, we're at the very beginning of culinary history, right? A lot of restaurants and chefs are stuck in the past. They keep making the same recipes from, I don't know, the 18th and the 19th century. I see myself as an explorer who is on a journey, and there are whole continents out there that are unexplored. There are things we can taste that we have never tasted before. Like there are things we can experience that we've never experienced before. And that's what it means to be a morally ambitious culinary pioneer, right? Let's not be stuck in the past. Let's move on to new and better and more exciting things.
That's wonderful. I presume people come with like a ton of ideas when they enter the School of Moral Ambition, or is it more like the way you described this? Well, you might have your own idea, but the most important thing is that you do something that matters, right?
Yeah. I think that's sometimes actually a problem, that people come with their own preconceptions. Say like, oh, I think that this particular hobby horse of mine, that's what we need to fix.
Because this is what I...
Yeah, because I care deeply about it. I think we have to be very passionate, but almost like on a higher philosophical meta level, right? In the book, I give an example of someone who was a doctor at the NHS in the UK, who cared deeply about helping people, but who had this nagging feeling that, treating rich patients in the last months of their life was probably not the best way, not the most, if you have a whole career, I mean, it's good work, don't get me wrong, but she was morally ambitious. She wanted more. Yeah. And so she realized, hey, global health, that's probably where I can do much more. Then she joined a school in London that I describe as the Hogwarts for do-gooders. It's an incredible place where some of the most ambitious young people come to co-found the most effective NGOs in the global health space. And the researchers there actually convinced her that lead poisoning was one of the most neglected challenges here. She had never really thought about it. It was completely new to her. But once she started doing the research, she became incredibly passionate about it. So they did do this. They co-founded the Lead Exposure Elimination Project, which is one of the most effective NGOs in the world right now. And they've already convinced the government of Malawi to more effectively regulate lead in paint. And if you then do the calculations there, I mean, it's the work of thousands of doctors in terms of life years saved. I think that's awesome.
And you know what baffles me with these examples that you bring forth? Because like I remember lead poisoning as something we talked about in the 80s.
Yep.
And tobacco, I thought that was, we're done with that in the 90s.
The future is already here, just not evenly distributed.
Yeah.
That's what I think William Gibson said. That's the thing. Now, if you only look at your own gated community in Norway or the Netherlands, then the amount of impact you will have is going to be much, much smaller. Yeah. That doesn't mean that you only have to care about people far away, and not at all, right? For me, it's rather obvious that you care more about the people closer to you, whether you're a parent or, a citizen of your country. Obviously, like I'm a pretty proud Dutchman, and I think it's been an immense mistake of left-wingers to give patriotism away to the fascists. It's like social democracy, in my view, should by definition be very patriotic. Yeah. But real patriotism is also about opening the windows, right? If you really built your country and your identity on solid foundations, then you have, the mental confidence and the strength to say, okay, I'm interested in the rest of the world as well. If you're really unsure about yourself, then yeah, definitely you're going to close the windows, right? So that's very much what I've been advocating, by the way, in all my books. And what I think the world also desperately needs from Norway right now. We don't want you to be this rich gated community where, you take very well care of, I don't know, the few homeless people that you have. You could do so much more as a country.
Let's talk about that. I wanted to talk about that because in our think tank agenda, and we've written a bit about our sovereign wealth fund.
Yeah.
As you know, it's the largest in the world. Result of very successful financial policy, basically. We sort of learned from you guys in Holland, because at least that was what we always been taught, that we didn't want to get Dutch disease, which was, you explore for oil and gas, you get a lot of money, you pour it into the economy, and the economy takes a tanking because it can't handle that amount of money.
Yeah.
So now we build up this sovereign wealth fund, and it's huge. And at some point, I think we should continue to explore for oil and gas and produce it and sell it to Europe, especially after Ukraine. But I do think that in this day and age, in the age of climate change, you can't just put that on sort of like a neutral fund. You have to be more progressive in your investment to defend that you sell oil and gas that will be burned, and contribute to climate change. So I guess that would be like a moral ambitious idea for Norway, right?
Absolutely. Can I do my TED Talk on this?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready for it. I'm looking forward to it because I've been talking about it for a couple of years, and I don't feel the idea get the traction it deserves.
Yeah.
I feel like a hippie, when I talk about it.
Yeah.
And I'm a sort of a mainstream social democrat.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's first set the scene. It's 2025. Democracy is crumbling around the globe. Countries are giving up on their moral commitments, and not just the US that has just, put USAID through the shredder, but also the UK, massive cuts to development aid, lowest level, 0.3% now of GDP, lowest level that they've ever had. The Netherlands has pretty much abolished development aid. Basically, social democracy, civilization as we know it, is under immense pressure. The US isn't even a democracy anymore. I recently spoke to the director of the Freedom House, actually the former director, because he's now been purged in, one of those Trump purges. And he said, this is, the 17th year in which authoritarianism is on the rise and democracy is declining. That is the world we live in today. But there is this one small country in the north, a country that has an incredible tradition in long-term thinking, an absolutely incredible tradition. The whole world is turning short-termist, right? We've got the leader of the world, Donald Trump, can barely finish a sentence without, losing his train of thought. But then this country managed to build something that no other country managed to build. Like, as you said, the Dutch had a lot of money, made a lot of money with drilling the gas, and we spent it on ourselves and got Dutch disease. In Dubai, they built all these ugly skyscrapers. But then you guys said, okay, no, we're going to secure the future of our kids and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. We're going to secure the future of the welfare state. And with incredible foresight and with incredible patience, over half a century, you did it, right? You built the biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world, an insane, mind-boggling amount of money. And you did it in a way that you can be really, really proud of. I mean, during the Ukrainian war, we Dutch, we were so happy that we could call up the Norwegians and say hey, can you work a little bit harder? Because we don't want to buy from a dictator anymore. We want to buy from our democratic allies. And I think that's incredibly essential indeed in the future, is that we'll be reliant on fossil fuels for quite some time. And Norway can be the arsenal of democracy here. We really do not want to buy from those dictators. We want to buy from you. And so that will also give you an immense privilege, basically, when you've already achieved that first goal. Because let's be honest, right? it's now so much money that it's impossible to spend it on yourself. Like even for like the next 2 centuries, it's like it is so much. Now, at a time in 2025, when we're facing enormous challenges, when the whole world is pulling back, when the whole world is these great challenges, whether it's the next pandemic or climate change, we're basically all ignoring that. Now is the time when we need
This is our time, yeah.
We need a superhero, honestly. And I know that Norwegians are not a very arrogant people. You know, they're not super. They're not like
you would be surprised.
Well, they're not like Americans waving their flags and saying we're the greatest nation on earth. But we kind of need you right now as the superheroes who say, okay, we're going to spend a relatively small percentage actually of this fund. Maybe just, let's say all the money you've earned during the war with Ukraine, right? What is it? 50 billion, 100 billion? A lot of billions.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe just that and say, okay, we're going to put that into a fund, not just to tackle, you know, climate change and related issues, but no, make it broader, you know, make it really a bipartisan, politically neutral thing. It has to be owned by all Norwegians, by all political parties. Yeah. So it's about pandemic prevention as well, for example.
So it's not like a leftist project.
No, I think it's a patriotic project. I think that's incredibly important. It just shows the whole world what social democracy and what forethought can mean. So that when the next pandemic arrives, not just like with the Ukrainian war that we all call Norway, like help us. No, but also for other issues. Because like in general, the fund could be devoted to maybe preparedness. Like we are going into the 21st century with some enormous existential threats ahead of us, whether that's the risk of AI or biotech or the next pandemic and we're just not prepared. The whole world spends only $1 billion a year on emerging infectious diseases like Zika and Ebola. And Norway could step up. And honestly, it will be the coolest thing a country has ever done since the British abolitionist movement or something like that.
That's quite something. You listen to my fellow Norwegians, we should listen to this guy.
Thank you for attending my TED Talk. Yes.
So I thought a bit about this, and we had, of course, some debates about it. Surprisingly, not so many, but some. But I've been tending to think that since this profit and this fund and the money, it comes from something from fossil fuels, you know, fossil fuels have been great for humankind in so many ways. It's built society. It's like the cornerstone of civilization, but also it creates climate change. So I sort of, in my head, it's been like, okay, the money created this problem, so let's focus on that problem.
I understand that.
You see the political logic in it.
I see the leftist progressive logic behind it. And it's a powerful logic, don't get me wrong. But I think it would be... if you really want to make this a bipartisan, patriotic project, it has to be broader than that. I mean, too often, I think now in left-wing circles, climate has become everything, right? So when we think about immigration, we're like, oh, that's because of climate change. When we think about poverty, it's like, that's because of climate change. And inequality, it's all related to climate. There's someone who calls this climatism. And I think that's a real problem, actually. Climate change is a big problem. Global warming is a big problem. But it's not the only one. And there are some out there that I would even argue are bigger problems. Just in terms of human suffering, for example. If you're like really cosmopolitan and preventing human suffering is what you care about most, why do we never talk about tuberculosis? It's 1.2 million deaths every year. No one seems to give a shit about it. Do you know how many people die from natural disasters each year?
No.
60,000. Most of that from earthquakes. So that's orders of magnitude smaller than tuberculosis or malaria. Do you know what has happened to the number of victims from natural disasters in the last 100 years? Has it gone up or gone down?
I read about it in your book, and it has gone down actually, right?
Massively. Yeah. It's declined by more than 90%. So actually the number of casualties, victims from extreme weather is at historically low points. These are the kind of facts that left-wing progressive people just don't like to acknowledge. But it is true, and it's actually really good news. Humans are incredibly adaptive as a species. And as we get richer, societies get better at protecting themselves. We remember the horrible tsunami in 2004, right? With, 200,000 casualties?
Yeah.
I mean, that was mainly a lack of preparation. There was no good warning system, right? So preparation is going to be the essential thing in the 21st century. And again, back to my pitch. This is, in my view, what should be at the heart. Because like the Norwegians, culturally, you're like best positioned. There's no nation that has a reputation for forethought and long-term thinking like you have.
I feel better just while you're talking.
I can keep going on. If that helps making it happen, I'm happy to,
I guess, we should move on from this, but I guess climate change, when I read the reports, the UN reports and so forth, it seems like the existential question in a way, or at least in many, but in your worldview, it's one of the existential questions. Look, it is a very existential question, and I'm particularly worried about sort of the worst case scenarios, right, where the temperature really goes to like 3.5, 4 degrees, etc. At the same time, though, there's a lot of doomerism here. I find it striking that if I read some really bad news about climate change in any progressive newspaper, then I look at the paper itself, and almost always the scenario that's being relied on is RCP 8.5, which is like the worst case scenario. That is now so incredibly unrealistic. Like that scenario assumes that later in the century we will build cars that burn coal to drive. Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of not happening, right? That doesn't mean that you should always be like happy and optimistic, but there's a kind of doomerism. Is that some people almost seem to like, how do you say that?
Yeah.
Enjoy, like, oh, it's getting even worse.
Yeah.
Yes, like now I can score more political points.
And as a historian, I'm sure you tracked. This is something we do from time to time in human history. We think about doomsday, right? It's like a trait of the human kind.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I get it. 21st century is an incredibly dangerous century, but for multiple reasons. There are multiple existential threats we face, and we got to look at that in a clear-eyed way and not let ideology get in the way.
Okay, so a patriotic project.
Yep.
We'll think about it.
Oh, well, we're going to do it.
Yeah, we're going to do it.
That's what this podcast is going to be devoted to from now on, right? How do you... No, but it's an interesting question. Like, what would it take in Norway? Like, what would if I go back to the British Society for the Abolition of the Slave Trade, it was just 12 individuals coming together in May 1787 in a small print shop at number 2 George Yard. 12 individuals who said, you know what? We think this could happen, actually. Right now, slavery is the most profitable institution. In the UK, we're making an enormous amount of money on it. But if we have the perseverance, if we really build that movement, we think we could do it. And it took them much longer than they thought. Most of them didn't actually get to see the end of slavery, but they did it. And I think something like this could be like a defining generational project for young, ambitious, or maybe not even young, but for like morally ambitious people in Norway. Because all that money, it's kind of, you got to make a decision at some point. Like Dutch disease, you cannot possibly spend it on yourself. Like, what are you going to do it? What do you own? What is it, like 2% of the world stock market?
Yeah, 2%. Like 7 promille of the population of the world, 2% of the stock market. I think one way to go ahead about it would be that because we have a discussion if we should continue with oil and gas. Should we continue to explore, to produce? And there's a political pressure from young environmentally conscious people that we should stop. And if you look at the youth parties, they were like, no, we have to stop. And also there's an argument that we have to stop or else we'll be sidelined, we'll fall behind because we put all our efforts into oil and gas while the world is going green. So that's been a big debate here. But in my head, it's, I guess, if you can accept that we'll explore and produce and sell, but we'll use the profit to prove that. That's a political compromise. Be interesting.
Let me, as a Dutch millennial, talk to the young people in Norway. please don't stop drilling, honestly. Like, it will mean that we, the Dutch, will have to start buying it from the Saudis. We'll have to call Putin again. We're very glad that we have, social democratic allies in Norway. And sorry, the painful reality is that we're going to be reliant on fossil fuels for some time. We're working hard, and yes, we should work harder on decarbonization. But the answer is really not that our democratic allies stop this, because we're going to buy it anyway.
So keep on drilling, but use the money for something good.
For something not just good, but for something brilliant. We can be much more ambitious than just, washing our own hands and saying, like, we're morally pure. We were standing on the sidelines. We didn't play a role. Norway could achieve much bigger things than that.
That's a good one. We have to, we're moving to a close, but I want to talk a little bit about taxes.
Sure. It's my favorite subject.
Our election is
yes
getting close. Tax has been a huge debate here, strangely enough, since, people have been hit by the same as the rest of the West, inflation, interest rates going up. So for the first time, actually in a couple of generations, people are not as well off. It's getting better slowly, but it's been a hit for the middle class and for a lot of people. But we had this huge debate about rich people who don't want to pay wealth tax.
Yeah, I read about it. Yeah.
So I don't know. In the school you start in, or the movement you're part of building, how would you go about the problem with tax?
So two things. There are really two things we need here. The first thing is we shouldn't be scared of the billionaires. So we need a pretty aggressive social democratic approach to people who threaten to leave the country to Switzerland or anything like that. We got to show our muscles. Really say, okay, you want to go? Okay, we'll send an army of lawyers and accountants after you. We'll make you pay the exit tax. We will trail you with trailing taxes. We will make sure you pay. That's the most important thing. Like, you made your fortune here in Norway. That means you have certain obligations. That is what it means to be Norwegian. That is what it means to be, a good patriot. If you want to, be a kind of a traitor to your country, we won't let you. That's the first thing. We got to be much more aggressive and bold. The standard leftist approach is to say, like, oh, they're such greedy people. Please don't do it. Come on. Have a bit more balls than that.
Okay.
And the second thing, I already alluded to this, is grounded in the language of patriotism, right? That is what it means to be Norwegian. You can be very proud that you built your fortune in one of the great countries in the world, but that also means you have certain responsibilities, right? With great privilege comes great responsibilities. And this is one of the oldest taxes in Norway, going back more than a century. So it's part of our tradition. It is who we are as a people.
Yeah, you contribute.
Yes. And if you're trying to damage that, demolish that, undermine that in any way, then that is un-Norwegian, which is... Yeah, I've been told one of the worst insults here, right? So, and this is so much more effective, in my experience, in my view, than the standard approach. I spoke to one social democratic politician who was like, yeah, it had a much, in my view, much weaker argument, like, oh, what will it say about us, and what is the message to other people who pay their taxes? It might come across as unfair, and this language of fairness, it's. Not saying it should never be a part of the narrative, but I think you can be much bolder and much more self-confident.
Well, yeah, this is a big discussion. I guess we sort of like many of our rich people because we feel they're part of us, and then we get a bit shocked when they suddenly just move. It's like, what? It's like. So I think that's also why it's become such a politically strangely big deal.
Yeah.
But
it's a little bit like a breakup. But if someone is an asshole, you got to be clear and honest about it.
Not
right?
me. It's not me. It's you.
Yeah. And I mean, this is the effect of years and years of neoliberalism. States who've somehow convinced themselves that they're not very powerful. But they are very powerful, right? The power of the people through democracy, through the states that they control is formidable, is immense. And this, a silly crypto billionaire that wants to go to Switzerland, you can squeeze that.
Yeah.
Go to Switzerland, but not before we've squeezed all the juice out of you. Yeah. I think we got to be pretty honest there.
So you want people, morally ambitious people, to join your movement, of course. How about trade unions and normal political parties? That might be how we end this talk.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm pretty concerned that, especially young people, they don't want to go into politics.
Yeah,
that's why I think maybe they should meditate. By the way, then it would be a little bit easier.
Yeah. It could definitely be useful in the toolkit. So look, there are many roles to play in every different movement, and what we advise people is to look for the pressure points. It's a little bit like social acupuncture. Go where others don't go. Find those places where you can make the biggest possible difference. So sometimes that means working on really neglected causes, but indeed it could also mean going into rooms where you can actually be super influential, but for some reason no one goes there. That's why we work a lot in Brussels, because Brussels is super unsexy, obviously, but incredibly powerful. Yeah. Like 500 million people in the EU. And if you really know your way, if you really understand how a law gets made, how the sausage gets made in Brussels, that is immense power. And probably the same is true for these trade unions. The metaphor that I like is like, hey, we're all in this plane, comfortably sipping our bubbles. And at some point you're like, hey, who's actually steering the plane? And you go into the cockpit and, cockpit is empty. That's the situation. It's kind of scary, but also pretty cool. Like you can just, you don't need to wait for permission.
Get into the cockpit, guys.
Yep.
Okay. Rutger Bregman, great having you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.